the Harris House in Otego on April 19, 1994. I'm speaking to Mr. James Sommer. I am Zachary Marsh. Thank you, Mr. Sommer, for taking part in our World War II local history project. When the war broke out, were you a student or were you out of school?
I was a student. Yeah. When the war broke out, that would be 41. Yeah, I think I was in about 6th grade then, 6th or 7th grade.
When did you enter the service?
I entered the service in 1943.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
What branch of service were you in?
I was in the United States Navy.
Where did you receive training?
My boot camp training was at Sampson, New York, on the Finger Lakes.
What theater of war were you in?
I was in the Southwest Pacific, in the Philippines and in New Guinea.
What were your duties?
Well, when I first went aboard ship, I was a deckhand, and then I asked if I could start working in the kitchen as a baker. And so I learned the baking trade when I was in the Navy.
Tell us a little bit about the everyday life on the ship. Where did you sleep?
I slept in a bunk that was, each department had its own small, you might call it a room or a compartment. And the commissary department, who I belonged to, that was on the side of the ship, 2 decks down. And that was 6 booths, 6 bunks, 2 rears, 3 high.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that room there was 1 long table and the 6 bunks, and that's where we slept.
What did you eat?
Well, I eat pretty good. Because I worked in the kitchen. And so we had 3 meals a day, and that was part of my job, was to help get those meals together for the rest of the crew. So I baked bread and cakes and cookies and things like that for the crew. And then when we carried troops, Army personnel, then I had to bake for them too. But I usually had help from the Army personnel to come in and help me when I had a lot more baking to do.
How was the food stored so it didn't spoil?
Well, a lot of it was in tins, canned, and then a lot of it we kept in refrigeration. We had a refrigeration unit down below the crew's quarters, and so that's how we kept our food fresh. And then every month or 2 we replenish our supplies at the home base.
Was your ship engaged in any battles?
Yeah. Soon after I got overseas, and I was stationed aboard an LST, that landing ship tank. And we were slated for the invasion of the Philippines at Leyte Gulf. And so we were part of that armada that went in there, and the troops that we carried were in the first wave.
Oh, what was the name of the battle?
Leyte Gulf.
You mentioned in your letter you screwed up royally at your first captain's inspection. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, I guess I can. They had a captain's inspection at the boot training camp at Sampson, where I was, and the chief petty officer in charge of the company that I was attached to told me to clean what we used to call it a head. Now they call it a jana, but the bathroom and the toilets. So that was my job, to get ready for that inspection. And he said, now don't start cleaning it too soon, because everyone has to use it in order to get ready for inspection. So I said, well, what about if I can't get back into my my undressed blues for inspection because I'll be in there working. And he said, well, don't worry about that. You just change your clothes when you get time. So the inspection started, and I just barely finished the cleaning the head. And when I got back to my locker, I was in the midst of changing from my work clothes to my undressed blues for inspection. And as the captain came around the corner, my pants were up to my knees. And so therefore, he wanted to know just what was going on, and I told him I was following Chief Brown's instructions. So he just shook his head and walked away.
You also mentioned that raincoat scandal. What was that about?
Okay. The raincoat scandal, I had been sent down to the New Orleans, I was sent down to the Memphis, Tennessee Air Base to take aerial gunner training. And as we got there, we were met at the train by a chief petty officer, and he in turn marched us to our barracks. And we left all of our things there, and he told us that we had to have raincoats. That was a rule of the base because they had so much rain there. So they took us over to the pay master, and he gave us a special paycheck for, I think it was $22. And then they marched us to another building where they handed out raincoats, and they gave you the raincoat and you handed over that paycheck. And so then they marched us back to the barracks, and they told we didn't have any lockers. And so they said, lay everything there on your bunks, pick a bunk, lay yourself out there, and because you gotta go for some more indoctrination. So we all left. Well, when we got back, all the raincoats were missing. And what was going on was naturally they were stealing the raincoats, selling them over again for each new draft of men that came to that base. But we didn't know that at the time. But later on, I guess maybe 25 years after I had been out of the Navy, I saw an article in the magazine, and it mentioned the admiral that was in charge of the base at that time had finally been arrested, along with some of his cronies that were pulling the raincoat scam. And that made me feel very happy that the family got caught.
Have you kept in touch with any of the friends you made in the service?
I did for a while, the first, say, 18, 20 years or so. But then after that, we just dropped out. I haven't talked to anyone that I was in the service with for many years.
Where were you when the war ended?
When the war ended, I was at sea. My ship was on its way to Formosa with Air Force supplies, and they found the notice came over the radio that the war was over, that an atomic bomb had been dropped, and we thought we were going to have to be in on the invasion of Japan, but it so happened we didn't because the war was over.
Did you bring home any souvenirs?
No, not really. The only thing I brought home was myself and the uniform on my back.
Have you returned to where you were during the war?
No, I haven't. That was all over there in the Philippines and New Guinea, and so that was it's just too far away. And there wasn't anything there that I really wanted to revisit anyway. I didn't care for it.
Would you like to? Why or why not?
Would I like what?
To visit there again, or why or why not?
Oh, well, no. There's only one island in the Philippines that really impressed me, and that was Panay Island. Iloilo was the name of the city, and that was very well. I mean, even during the war, you could see that it was well kept, and it was a nice little city. And that's the only one over there that I had any thought about at all.
Did you have any brothers in the service?
Yes, I did. I had my oldest brother, Bill, went in the service in 1940, I think it was, before the war. And my brother, Bud, went in the Marine Corps about 6 months before I did in 1943.
What effect did the war have on your family?
Well, it was hard for my parents because we left them on the farm all alone. And so they had to run the farm all by themselves, and it was very hard on them. It certainly helped me grow up, and I'm sure it did most everybody else. You grow up real fast when you're thrown into that kind of a situation. But as far it matured us. We were lucky. None of us were hurt, and so we were very fortunate.
Why do you think it is important to preserve the stories of those who lived during World War II?
Well, it isn't just World War II. I think history itself is important because it is what has happened in the past, and I think that's how you learn. It's got to have a big impact. It should have a big impact on the decisions you make today by learning what people did in the past and why they did it. History to me is a very fascinating and important subject.
Are there any other memories or thoughts you would like to share?
Well, yeah. I can tell you about the time when I left San Francisco on a troop ship going over to New Guinea, and we had no escort whatsoever. We were fortunate that it was a fairly fast ship, right around 22, 23 knots. And so going over, we had a submarine scare, but nothing came of it. But the thought of that ship going down made me want to sleep on the top deck. And so that's where I slept, right in a pile of life jackets. They had two huge piles of life jackets on the main deck, and I just burrowed a hole right in there, and that's where I slept. Rain or sunshine, it didn't matter. That's where I stayed. And I often think about that. Another time was before I went overseas. I was at this base in San Francisco called Tamparang Racetrack, and it was my first encounter with anything racial prejudice or anything like that. I'd never seen anything like that before, never encountered it. And the Navy at that time, well, all your services at that time were segregated services. Your black people all were kept separate from the white people as much as possible. And they had a barracks there that all black personnel stayed in. And we didn't know what was going on. We heard a lot of hollering going on, and we kind of stood around waiting to see what was happening. And the shore patrol came and surrounded the building, and they threw a bullhorn. The officer just shouted that he was given exactly 5 minutes to come out with their hands up, or they would open fire. And they did. They finally did come out. They were having a drunken brawl in there, and so they broke it up real quick. But I didn't know that problem never existed because I never saw it before, and it impressed me very much. I couldn't understand why people in the same service fighting the same war had to be segregated. That wasn't right. And at that time. I was only 17 years old, but still, it made me realize just what there was out there in the world that I hadn't seen.
What are knots?
Knots, that's how they measure the speed of a ship. I can't give you the exact equivalent. It's, I think it's a little, oh gosh, I think it's a little less than, 1 knot is a little less than a mile an hour. And so, like my ship was a flat-bottomed, bow-doored ship. On the bow of the ship, on the front of the ship, the bow doors opened up and a ramp would come down after we went up on the beach. So it was not a fast ship. Flank speed, which is top speed, was 11 knots. Excuse me, 11 knots. So that would probably be about maybe 10 miles an hour, something like that.
Oh, can you remember your rank and your serial number?
Well, I'll try. My rank was Baker, 3rd class when I was discharged from the Navy. My serial number was 601-5660.
Thank you very much for this interview.